Dana Johnson. I am the Chief Operating Officer here at the Cobb Chamber of Commerce and also the Executive Director of Select Cobb. And I want to welcome you to today's webinar. We are going to wait a few minutes to give everyone time to come in. And you'll probably get sick of hearing me say this as we're waiting a few minutes for everyone to get on. But as we're going through, if you have any questions about anything that comes up during discussion, please make sure you put your question in the chat and have it go to all panelists and attendees. That way everyone can see the questions that are being asked, and then our moderator will be able to help make sure they get answered for you. So again, we'll wait a few minutes in order to kind of get everyone loaded and ready to go, and then we'll kick off this fantastic group of speakers who are going to enlighten us on some new trade policy between our North American friends, countries in North America. So again, welcome everybody. Dana Johnson, Cobb Chamber of Commerce, Chief Operating Officer and Executive Director of Select Cobb. We are here today to talk about the new NAFTA, the United States and Mexico Canada agreement, and what it means for your business. The USMCA became effective on July the 1st of 2020 this year. This agreement brought about positive changes for many industry sectors doing business across North America. It is really the glue, the economic glue that keeps America, Canada, and Mexico together, combined and operating together in a solidified union of corporate partnerships. Today, we're going to hear from a variety of experts on this subject, giving their perspective on the agreement and sharing ways that they have navigated through the changes. Just to kind of give you a highlight, and we'll have some formal introductions in a second, but today we will be hearing from Nadia Theodore, the Consul General of Canada, Javier Diaz de Leon, Consul General of Mexico, David Weiner, Counsel and Senior Trade Commissioner for the Consulate General of Canada, Luis Gonzalez, who is the Counsel for Economic and Political Affairs, Consulate General of Mexico, Alan Bogenschutz, which is the Vice President of Risk Management for YKK, Maria Luisa Boyce, who is the Vice President of Global Public Affairs for UPS, Justin Bunag, who is the CEO of Finero, and Nassim Sarafala, who is the International Trade Specialist with U.S. Commercial Service. All of these individuals will be speaking to us, and they'll be moderated by our own Trevor Williams with Global Atlanta, a fantastic expert in global affairs in Metro Atlanta. And we thank Trevor for joining us today and helping us in navigating this conversation about the USMCA. Before we kind of get going and hand things off, this could not be done without the generosity of our sponsors. So let me take a second to thank the Bottoms Group and the Consulate General of Canada, our sponsors for this program. The Bottoms Group is our year-long small business series sponsor, and we want to thank them for their commitment to the Cobb Chamber through this year. Unfortunately, they do not have someone here to speak today, but we want to thank the Bottoms Group is a insurance broker firm located here in Marietta, Georgia. They offer services such as estate planning, succession planning, and employee benefits plans. So thank you, Gary Bottoms and the Bottoms Group, for your sponsorship of the Cobb Chamber of Commerce and our Small Business Series. You will be hearing a lot from the Consul General of Canada, so I'm not going to give a huge introduction to them, but we so thank the Consul General of Canada for their sponsorship of today's program. And with that, again, I'm going to thank everyone for joining us today. I will remind everyone one more time, if you have any questions during the program, please put them in the chat and make sure it goes to all attendees and all panelists. That way we make sure that Justin has access to the questions being asked to make sure we can get them answered for you. And with that, I am going to hand the program over to Trevor Williams of Global Atlanta. Trevor, take it away, sir.
Thank you so much, Dana, for those kind introductions, especially for me. I really appreciate that. I am, as you said, the managing editor of Global Atlanta. We are a news website here in Atlanta that covers international business, trade, and investment. So we are so excited to be tapping into this topic today that we've written so much about and finally seen come to the finish line here in early July. Now creates a new starting point for U.S.-Mexico-Canada relations. And I'm here to kind of guide us along the path. And I've got you, since Dana gave us kind of the overview, I'm going to just jump right into it and start introducing our speakers. Our first kind of time slot here is delegated to our consuls general, our diplomats here from Mexico and Canada. And since I'm not seeing Nadia right now, I'm going to go straight to Javier Diaz de Leon, who joined the Mexican consulate here in Atlanta as Consul General in June of 2016. Javier has been very gracious with his time, particularly when it comes to trade topics. He's been all over creation, I will say, and been a speaker at various events that we've done, actually, at Global Atlanta as well. He's very well versed in the topic. He also has been in various positions around the United States, various consulates, and is, I would say, an expert in the relationship between the U.S. and Mexico. So Javier, why don't you give us a little bit of the Mexican perspective about the negotiations around the agreement and what Mexico hoped to accomplish and where you see things going forward.
Thank you. First of all, very happy to be here. I want to thank so many people, but of course, Jorge from Pendleton Group, Jorge Fernandez from Pendleton Group, the board members and executive officers at the COP Chamber of Commerce, of course, all the panelists here. And yeah, I mean, when we talk about, you know, all this process that we're going through for the past couple of years in terms of what we see an updating of our trade relationship within the framework of NAFTA, it's always important to understand, you know, where we come from and particularly where Mexico comes from in terms of how we have developed and how we have been transformed as a country and as an economy. Even you can even argue, even politically and many other ways, culturally, the country, in my country, has been transformed because of our opening up of our economy to the world, and particularly to the United States. We have been in a free trade agreement for 25 years. And U.S. trade during that time, when we started NAFTA during the 90s, in the mid-90s, U.S. trade with Mexico has more than tripled during that time. And of course, our trade with Canada has also boomed tremendously during that time. And all of us have engaged and have developed a very different and very, you know, upward looking trajectory in our economic relationship as partners and as particularly as manufacturing partners. Like I always say too, it's always important to say that due to NAFTA, Mexico underwent a very dramatic modernization effort, and particularly in its economy. Mexico has come from being basically a very much a commodity-based economy. By the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, Mexico was basically known in the world as an oil-based economy. We were an oil exporter, and we still are. Mexico is still one of the most important oil exporters in the world, but our economy is far more diversified now than it was back then when we started NAFTA. Basically, the Mexican economy has transformed into basically manufacturing base, one of the most important manufacturing bases in the world in several sectors in the economy in the world. And that has strengthened our competitiveness, and it had also strengthened Mexico's institutional democratic regime. Mexico is a very competitive and a very open democracy now. And that is very different from what you probably might remember back then. Mexico now is the largest Spanish-speaking democracy in the world. And the economy of Mexico is the 15th largest in the world. And that has, you know, set up Mexico in a very different situation than what it was before. In 2019, for example, we became the first U.S. trading partner in the world for the first time ever. And we came into the new agreement, the new treaty, from our perspective, because we needed to update NAFTA. NAFTA was done in the beginning of the 90s when the world was different. There was no e-trade, no digital economy. There are many things that we needed to update. to a 21st century agreement, which is what my colleagues are going to talk about during this webinar. And we needed to modernize the rules in trade in North America with state-of-the-art provisions, things like market access, digital trade, intellectual property, agricultural in the new 21st century, technical barriers to trade, financial services, customs, state-owned enterprises, competition policy. All of those things needed to be looked over. We as a region, we always say that we are the most competitive region, manufacturing region in the world. We export as a group to the rest of the world about $3.6 trillion. However, we import about $4.2 trillion. So we need to look into this imbalance with our trade to the rest of the world and to look into greater integration of our economies. And these new improvements in the USMCA strengthen particularly our productive chains, our chain supplies, because that's what we are all about. Most of what we trade with each other, I know my dear friend Trevor has heard me say this a million times. Yes, no, you buy our tequila, we buy your peaches. Yes, we do that, but it's not really about that. Most of the trade, the largest majority of the trade that goes on between the US and Mexico, between Georgia and Mexico, is manufacturing pieces, manufacturing goods. We are a manufacturing hub in North America, and we manufacture stuff together. It can be aerospace, it can be, of course, the car industry. There are so many diverse industries in which we are linked together and we are connected to each other. So we see USMCA as a tool to produce and create better jobs in this manufacturing supply chain. Because we have a great competition edge over the rest of the world. We have lower transportation costs for manufacturing. We have very reliable suppliers, and we have a very strong and very capable regional labor force. That puts us as a region in a better position than most of the other manufacturing regions. I would say not most, all of the other manufacturing regions in the world. And the way we see our partnership is not about us, creating a block and closing our countries, our economy, our regional economy to the rest of the world. It's about being more competitive in the global economy with other regions in the world, but being open. And we firmly believe in an open economy, in an open global trade for the future. Of course, with fair rules. And so we are, far from distancing ourselves in North America, far from, the breaks that are happening in other parts of the world. We in North America are coming together even more closely. We have now, since July, have a new USMCA agreement. And one of the things that is to be remembered is that one of the greatest strengths of North America, thanks to the USMCA, is that now in this world, as a very hard and very difficult to understand global economy and global situations is around the world, we in North America have certainty, and we have certainty about where we are going in our strategic alliance, economic and manufacturing alliance. We have certainty about market access between us, and we have certainty about manufacturing around the region. And that is very important, of course. We know for companies who operate, we're going to hear about from some of them in this webinar. And that is something that's not a small thing in this world right now, that I'm sure other regions of the world wish they had. This certainty that we have been able to produce. And so I will leave it there. We are very much engaged in looking over how we can improve, how we can make our region better. And we are very, very happy to support anyone who operates here in Georgia and who needs any assistance in terms of accessing opportunities in Mexico to strengthen our ties. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Javier. That was really comprehensive, as always. I appreciate that. We have Nadia Theodore, who's joined us. Thank you so much for joining us, Nadia. I'll give a brief introduction, and then we'll let you launch into it so that we can keep going here. Nadia, we're privileged to have because she has such vast trade experience and knowledge. She made her career really in the trade agreement and negotiations branch of Global Affairs Canada, and was involved in the TPP negotiations, which if anyone knows anything about the USMCA, a lot of the language that's used in the USMCA was taken from the TPP, which was modernizing a lot of trade policies. So maybe we have Nadia to thank for some of the language in there. I don't know, but she can tell us. So Nadia joined the Canadian Consulate General in August of 2017 as Consul General, and she's now transitioning out of Atlanta. I don't even think she's in Atlanta right now. I think she's already moved back to Canada. And thank you so much for taking your time to join us from there. Oh, you're muted. Sorry, got to unmute yourself. Yeah.
I was trying to mute and stop my video so that, because I know that with the Zoom, if too many of us are on video and mic, it tends to ruin the sound. So hopefully y'all can hear me and see me good, well. Thank you for having me. Indeed, you wouldn't know where I am because this is the Zoom world, and so we can be anywhere. But I am indeed in Toronto, transitioning back here, and happy to spend what are my final 2 weeks as Consul General of Canada to the Southeast United States, with my dear friends Trevor from Global Atlanta and my dear friend CG Javier from Mexico. One last road show, Javier, before we sail off into the sunset together. So listen, thank you very much for having me. Those who might know me know that talking about trade and trade policy, and in particular trade negotiations, is something that excites me. And really, you know, when Javier and I do these things, usually what I say is, you know, everything that Javier said, because the reason why trade negotiations and trade agreements are a little bit of a passion of mine are for all the reasons that CG de Leon already articulated. You know, for Canada, and I know it to be the same for the United States and Mexico, we really believe that what trade agreements like the USMCA are all about is the economic relationship between our two countries and our three countries, and also building economic opportunity and prosperity for all Georgians, all Americans, all Mexicans, and all Canadians. And if you dig one step deeper than that, if you double click, it's really about ensuring that trade agreements that we enter into allow all members of society and not just a privileged few to benefit from trade. And I really think that the USMCA, this modernization of NAFTA that took into account the fact, as Javier rightly said, that the internet is a thing now, a real thing that businesses are using to their advantage, and the recognition more than ever before that it is really small and medium-sized enterprises that drive the engines of our economy. And those small and medium-sized enterprises need to be able to have regulations and rules that are simple to understand, easy to execute, and that don't necessarily require you to have all the fancy lawyers in order to navigate. And I think that the USMCA really did a lot in that regard to bring that reality to the forefront. So maybe what I can do before I say a few words about the USMCA is really just remind people about the importance of the Canada-US relationship and the Canada-Georgia relationship. You know, and Javier and I joke about this all the time, Canada and Mexico.
We'll see if we can get her back here. She's muted and video off, so I'm not sure what happened there. We might have to ask David to jump in if she doesn't jump back here pretty soon, but because she queued it up for us really well. So let's see. I'm not sure what might be going on here. David, why don't you jump in? I think you have enough expertise about the Canada-US and Canada-Georgia relationship to know where to fill in there, I would imagine.
Yeah, I don't have the figures right here in front of me right now. I'm hoping that will be back in a second because I was prepared to talk more in detail about some of the aspects of the agreement itself.
Sure, sure. Let's give her a moment. I will just say that from my perspective, there's been no shortage of activity recently in the Canada-Georgia relationship for sure. We've had a lot of investment from Canada, particularly in forestry. There's been a lot of Canadian companies buying up our sawmills and things like that. And we've had a huge investment in Macon, a company called Irving Consumer Products that makes tissue. I think it was $400 million initially, and then they moved it, they expanded it immediately to I think it's over $800 million manufacturing plant. And the thing that I found interesting about that related to our supply chain conversation is that they are the owners of a lot of forested land up in Northeast Canada, one of the provinces, I can't remember which one, maybe New Brunswick. Correct. But they take all of the logs down on rail to Macon and actually use those for the manufacturing. So without this integrated block, then we wouldn't have that capability, and their factory may not be there. So I think we may have lost Nadia. I don't know. So our next part of the panel is going to be, like David said, the enumeration of all the various augmentations or differences between the NAFTA, which actually, despite all the threats, never was without effect here in North America. It always stayed in effect throughout the time of the negotiations, thankfully. And once it was concluded, there are quite a number of changes. I mean, many things stayed the same. Basically, the no tariff environment pretty much stayed the same, but like Nadia was mentioning, there were a lot of improvements related to the modernization of the economy, and the introduction of e-commerce and the inclusion of small businesses and things like that. So David is going to give us kind of his list from the Canadian side, and then we'll have Luis Gonzalez give us a sense for that from the Mexican side as well. I mean, it all applies to every country. It's not that it's fragmented like that, but we have both of these experts here. We're going to use them. So go ahead, David. Great.
And I think, thank you, Trevor. And I think this just points to how important cross-border digital is when we lose Nadia Theodore. Hopefully she'll be back with us shortly. But one of the things Consul General Theodore mentioned earlier, when NAFTA came into effect over a quarter century ago, it created the world's biggest free trade area, covering a market worth $22 trillion with over 480 million consumers. In 2018 alone, merchandise trade between Canada, the US, and Mexico reached nearly $1.2 trillion. That's 4 times the number it was in 1993 before NAFTA came into force. This morning, we also learned that how Canada, or actually it's something that Nadia would have said, Canada is the world's biggest buyer of American-made and Georgian-made products, far more than any other country in the world. And also, Mexico has now become the United States' largest trading partner. The good news is that the USMCA preserves all of the gains of NAFTA and takes things to a higher level. The USMCA preserves key elements of the trading relationships and incorporates new and updated provisions that seek to address 21st century trade issues and promote opportunities for the nearly 500 million people who call North America home. In this session, my colleague Luis from the Mexican consulate and I will try to cover some of the significant differences between NAFTA and the USMCA. There's a lot of territory to cover in just a few minutes, so please fasten your seatbelts. We'll have to keep things fairly high level and do our best not to bore you with many of the intricacies of the agreement. First and foremost, at the risk of repeating myself, I want to underscore that the USMCA ensures continued duty-free access, as Trevor was mentioning, for North American-made goods and maintains NAFTA's provisions on services and labor mobility. NAFTA eliminated virtually all of the tariffs between our countries with few exceptions. Better than 98% of goods trade is tariff-free, and the USMCA maintains these benefits, which means no new cost for manufacturers sourcing inputs from within North America. The USMCA includes 9 new chapters covering modern-day trade areas such as digital trade, small and medium-sized enterprises, and North American competitiveness. The agreement also includes new chapters on labor and the environment, both of which are subject to dispute settlement. In these chapters and throughout the agreement, the USMCA will help create incentives for higher wages and better working conditions in all 3 countries. I'll quickly touch upon some of the unique features of the USMCA as a whole that were not present in NAFTA, and then I'll drill down into some of the specific sectors, and then Luis will round things off with a review of some more sectors and industry-focused chapters such as automotive and agriculture. One major difference between NAFTA and the USMCA is the so-called sunset clause. The USMCA has a 16-year sunset clause, meaning the terms of the agreement expire or sunset after 16 years. The deal is also subject to review every 6 years, at which point the US, Mexico, and Canada can decide to extend the USMCA. The USMCA contains a number of provisions that have been designed to simplify and streamline customs procedures between the three countries. One important change in that regard are the rules concerning certification of origin. For those of you familiar with the topic, you may recall that there was a specific certificate of origin form just for NAFTA. USMCA does away with that form. Instead, you need to provide a minimum set of data elements, I believe 9 in total, to prove origin. And these elements may be on an invoice or any other document. The importer may make a claim for preferential tariff treatment based on certification of origin that has been completed by any one of the following: the importer, the exporter, or the producer or manufacturer. The certificate of origin can be completed and submitted electronically with electronic or digital signature and may cover a single importation, or you can use it to cover multiple importations of identical goods for a period of up to 12 months. The importer is responsible for exercising, of course, reasonable care concerning the accuracy of all documentation, and record-keeping requirements must be met. Certification is not required for importations valued under $2,500. There have also been some important changes to the rules of origin, not to be confused with the certificate of origin in the USMCA. Each 6-digit product harmonized system, or HS number, has a specific rule of origin, known as product-specific rules, or PSRs for short. NAFTA and USMCA product-specific rules of origin are similar, with both using net cost and transaction value to calculate regional value content. The USMCA also maintains and expands on the higher regional value content requirements that were used in NAFTA. There are selected sectors where the USMCA PSRs are significantly different from NAFTA, including autos and auto parts, which Luis will be covering later, as well as certain steel products, chemicals, and textiles, to name but a few. Also on the trade facilitation front, there have been some small but important changes to Canada and Mexico's de minimis rate. The de minimis rate, or threshold, sets the value of goods below which no duties or taxes are collected by customs. Canada has raised its de minimis level for North American express shipments from 20 Canadian dollars to 40 Canadian dollars for taxes, and will also offer duty-free treatment for express shipments of up to 150 Canadian dollars. Mexico will continue to provide a $50 US tax-free de minimis, and also provide duty-free treatment for express shipments up to the equivalent of 117 US dollars. I might add that the United States de minimis rate is much larger at $800 and remains unchanged in the USMCA. An important new chapter in the USMCA covers intellectual property, or IP rights. The USMCA provides full national treatment for copyright and related rights. The copyright term has been set to the life of the author plus 70 years or 75 years for publications. The agreement establishes appropriate copyright safe harbors to deter online piracy, and requires application or enforcement measures to the digital environment. The USMCA additionally provides a minimum 15-year protection on industrial designs, and allows for a patent term extension for unreasonable patent office and regulatory delays. There are strong civil and criminal code trade secret protections, including against misappropriation by state-owned enterprises. Other provisions include protection against the circumvention of technological protection measures, and the agreement grants ex officio authority for customs officials to stop suspected counterfeit goods. USMCA also imposes criminal penalties and civil remedies for both satellite and cable theft, and things like camcording. Finally, the USMCA reaffirms the Doha declarations on TRIPS and public health. How am I doing on time? Do I have a few more minutes, or do we?
I think that's probably good. I think we probably should jump over to Luis if we can. Yeah, Luis, why don't you give us a little bit more from as we can see, there's a lot going on in the agreement. So Luis. Go for it.
Thank you very much, Trevor. Yes, definitely there is a lot of information concerning the USMCA. And as David has already mentioned, there are many chapters that have been either modernized or updated, and there are some chapters that were added. We've been already talking about most of those chapters. And I would say that there are good stories about already the NAFTA that we have seen before in the ag sector as well as in the auto sector, and I believe those stories will continue to be successful, and they will continue to be good stories. For instance, for the agriculture, which is the chapter 3, this is one of the most important sectors for Mexico, but it is also one of the most successful stories for the USA. In 2019, USA and Mexico traded over $47 billion in agricultural goods, and the bilateral trade between both countries increased around 598% since 1994, since NAFTA. When you think about the production of agricultural products in the US, you would know that Mexico is the second market globally for US agricultural exports, but it's the first market for specific things such as apples, dry milk, corn, fructose, among others. When it comes to the trade with Canada in the ag sector, Mexico and Canada trade increased 24 times since 1994. If you check NAFTA and the USMCA, you could see that within the text, all of the products that had zero tariff remain zero tariff in the new agreement. Most of the new changes were for Canada and the US. For instance, some changes in additional products will eventually allow to enter into Canada duty-free some prescribed quantities of milk, cream, skim milk, butter, cream powder, cheese for industrial use, as well as other type of cheese. In return for opening US access for dairy, poultry, and egg products, the USMCA will provide increased US market access to Canadian sugar beet producers. When it comes to the auto sector, David already spoke a little bit about the certificates of origin as well as the rules of origin. However, I would like to mention that, and I would like also to invite the invitees and the companies present today to check the Annex 4B of the USMCA, because you could see there specifically by subtopic and by sector what are the definitions and the rules of origin for the chemical products, glass products, titanium products, steel, fiber optic, televisions, and electrical manufacturers. You could also find your product, whatever you are trying to export to Mexico or to Canada, you could find it in that annex. So take a look there, and I think there's going to be a lot of information for you. Within the auto sector, there were some changes, and I think this is one of the core industries of the USMCA. The auto sector increased some numbers when it comes to the materials that are used to produce the cars within the North American region, as well as the use of steel in the process. I would tell you this is one of the most important pillars of the economic relationship. Alone, for instance, the auto sector, Mexico and the US annually exchange $131 billion in automobiles and auto parts, and 30% of the light vehicles in the US are produced in Mexico, which is also the main supplier of the auto parts in the US. Some of these changes, as I was telling you, by 2023, the agreement requires that at least 75% of the components of the car should be manufactured in Mexico, US, or Canada. That was 62.5 with NAFTA. At the same time, 70% of the steel aluminum purchases must originate in North America. If you check the text, if you check the agreement, then you will find a lot of details when it comes to steel aluminum. It goes from its foundation, if they have to buy it, if they can buy it somewhere else, or if they have it produced within the region, the products that comes from the steel aluminum. So I would invite you to check this chapter. USMCA also incorporates a new labor value content rule. It says that 40% of the value of a vehicle must be manufactured by workers who earn at least $16 per hour. So saying that, these are good news for the Mexican labor force within the industry, and it's a good commitment from the Mexican government. And finally, I would like to mention that 7 auto parts were defined as essential and most originate in the region. That is the engine, the transmission, suspension, steering, chassis, batteries, and the bodywork. So that doesn't give just good business opportunities for the bigger players in the auto sector, but also for all those companies, smaller companies that take part of the value chain within the industry. And finally, I would like just to highlight the USMCA, and something that has been highly celebrated in the United States, is that the USMCA includes a chapter dedicated to SMEs, which I believe there are many SMEs in COP Chamber present today in this conference. And what it does is that, well, besides of creating a chapter for them, it gives them some of the details that in chapter 25, they give them some of the details and some of the benefits that they would be able to take advantage from. So I would like to invite you to check chapter 25. There is a new framework for an ongoing SME dialogue with stakeholders to help ensure that they can continue to benefit from the agreement. It creates a committee on SMEs comprised of government officers of each country to check on differences, establishes information sharing tools that will help these companies to better understand the benefits of the agreement and provide information for them to do business in Canada and Mexico. And checking yesterday some of the resources available online for you, the companies in the US. Some of the websites I found that I would like to recommend are it's the International Trade Administration. They have really good compilation of resources for SMEs to understand first the Mexican market, to understand the Canadian market. You can download a guide of how to do business with Mexico, how to do business with Canada, and also how to use the USMCA to trade with Mexico. You can also check the Small Business Administration International Sales, the STEP Awards, the Exim Bank website, which had a lot of credits to do business. The U.S. Foreign Agricultural Service have some tools, and from the Mexican side and the Canadian side, there is a TMEC, or which is called in Spanish, or USMCA is called TMEC, an official TMEC website, as well as a CUSMA website from the Canadian side. I won't take more time from this section, and it's been a pleasure, and I'm eager to listen to the rest of the panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luis. And just because we lost Nadia, we've also, I've just been informed, have one of our panelists who had a flight change and was not able to join us. So we have a little bit of extra time. I wanted to go back to David real quick and have you explain what rules of origin mean, just for people who may not be well versed in trade lingo, and
Sure.
also just offer any kind of closeout remarks that you may have had.
Sure. Rules of origin basically determine where a good was made, where it came from in its simplest form. Very rarely, well, it depends on the product, but many products are made of components that come from all over the world. And so figuring out where is that good coming from is what the rule is.
To qualify it for the duty-free access to the market.
Well, right? Yeah, in the case of automotive, for example, where the rules of origin requirements have been increased substantially, it's what makes a car North American, basically. Mm-hmm. What portion of that vehicle is made of North American parts. Right.
Yeah, and that enables it to be traded without the tariffs, right? Otherwise, if you're importing everything from Asia and assembling it here, it's not a North American car, even if it's assembled here. Mm-hmm. So did you have any last comments? I know you're going to be around, so throughout the next panel, if people have questions or anything.
Certainly, I'm glad to answer any questions. I had prepared some remarks on digital trade, and I think it suffices to say the big thing on digital trade is that there are no tariffs on the transmission of data across the borders, and there's enhanced rules to protect people's privacy and to protect against cybercrime, increased collaboration on cybersecurity between the three countries. And again, I'd be glad to answer any questions anyone may have later.
Great, sounds good. Yeah, and it's a sort of a shame in that sense, because we had someone from a financial technology company who was going to speak with us, and his company Finero, based here in Atlanta, does it's a payments facilitator that tries to kind of offset the need for remittances, so sending back of money back to Mexico, particularly Mexico right now. And I think he's going to get into Canada later, but that's all going to be governed by some of these provisions in the new agreement. So maybe we'll have him on in a different session. But I wanted to jump into our panel now. We've got three remaining and more than sufficient experts here to speak with us. And I'll introduce them briefly real quick, and then we'll just launch into the panel. I know that Dana already mentioned their names, but we've got Alan Bogenschutz, who's Vice President of Risk Management for YKK Corporation of America, based here in Marietta. And then we've got Maria Luisa Boyce, who is the VP of Global Public Affairs. I think she's in Washington or in Virginia maybe right now. And then we've got Nassim Sadarfala, who is International Trade Specialist for the U.S. Commercial Service, which is one of the major resources if you want to kind of dip your toe into the exporting world. So I wanted to start with Alan, since we heard from Luis all about the rules of origin, the changes to the labor requirements, particularly in the automotive sector. YKK is known for its zippers and known for its role in the textile industry as a supplier to the textile industry. But you also have zippers that go on car seats and fasteners that mark where the child seats go in cars and things like that. And I've been to one of your factories in Mexico and seen the massive operation there. So give us a little bit of background as to how important NAFTA has been. You know, the previous, I guess, or the original NAFTA had been both the positive and negative. I know that early on, I've seen presentations on how YKK's kind of base of customers evaporated when NAFTA first came, but now you sort of integrated into the newly reoriented supply chain. And give us a little bit of background on that and how important it remains going forward.
Absolutely. So a little bit of background on YKK for those that may not be initiated. We are a company that is headquartered in Tokyo, Japan. We divide the world up into 6 regions. Our region that is headquartered here in Marietta, Georgia, works with all the YKK facilities from Canada to Colombia. So in that regard, that's the part of the world that we are the most interested in. You mentioned a couple of the products that we make. I thought I would take us through maybe a minute long, just brief of what some of those products are. So I was going to try and take our Zoom platform and turn it into a positive. Maybe the audio or visual quality is not as good as if we were in person, but because we're not in person, I have the opportunity to come to you from our product showroom. So if you think
Nice.
about the core product that we make, it would be a zipper that looks much like this. This is something that you would find like in your blue jeans. So a quick anatomy of the zipper: you have the tape, the teeth, a top stop, and a bottom stop, a slider body, and a pull tab. So the teeth of the zipper and the body and the pull tab are all made from wire that is made in Macon, Georgia. So that wire is shipped to half of the YKK world. Literally half of the globe is supplied by brass wire from Macon, Georgia. So that's one thing where we can ship out, and a lot of that absolutely to Mexico and Canada. For those of you that live in Canada, you may be familiar with a wonderful coat manufacturer called Canada Goose. All of your Canada Goose zippers are made from wire that comes from Macon, Georgia. Interesting factoid. And zippers come in many different shapes and sizes. This is something closer to what's called a coil zipper, something that you might find in a lady's dress. This is what we refer to as our Visalon zipper. It has plastic teeth, something like you might find in a sports jacket. And here is a zipper that you might be familiar with if you have a Yeti cooler. This is something that is what we would call water resistant. Yeti might refer to it as waterproof. But this is what it would be, a genuine airtight, watertight zipper. This is something like you might find in a dry suit. If you've ever watched the show, The Deadliest Catch, the suits that those gentlemen have to put on if they have to go in the ocean absolutely have to be airtight, watertight. You find those in there. Here's an assortment of pull tabs. You can see they come in many different shapes and colors. We also make metal snaps and buttons that come in many different shapes and colors. YKK is also in the business of manufacturing commercial webbing. Just think narrow, strong fabric. Pardon me as I walk around the other side of the table here. We make plastic notions. So think things like this and maybe buckles or something that you might find in a backpack. Here's the Isofix buttons. For those of you that have kids, let's see if I can zoom in on this just a little bit. You have one of these in your car, right? And it tells you where to hook up your child seat. Every car made has these, and we are the main manufacturer of those for all of the car manufacturers. This is what I call, for those that are car fans, you'll recognize that symbol right there. That is for a Corvette. Basically, it's what gets put on the seat and holds the seatbelt in place. This product is actually made in Mexico. And for those of you that know, the Corvette is actually assembled or manufactured in Bowling Green, Kentucky. So that's absolutely crosses borders. Here's another product that most people have no clue that we make. So this is an ankle brace, and it is what you hear and see there is referred to as hook and loop. Some people might refer to that as Velcro. We generally don't say that name because Velcro is our competitor's brand name for that hook and loop product. But that's our contribution here to the ankle bracelet. Hook and loop comes in many, and by the way, this is for another company that we manufacture it for, but they put it under their label. Here's another piece of hook and loop that Trevor was mentioning before. Looks kind of strange or odd, and you've probably never seen it before unless you're in the seat manufacturing business. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you where this goes inside of the seat. What you can see is a cutaway of the seat here. You can see this product is embedded into the seat foam. That's the hook product that's actually made in Macon, Georgia. There's a loop product that's sewn into the fabric here, and once you push the seat together, the hook and loop is what keeps these nice crisp contours in your seat in place. And what you need to understand is that, as I said a moment ago, the hook is made in Macon, the loop is made in Mexico, the seat is actually assembled in Canada and then shipped back to Mexico to many of the car manufacturers. So as you can see, there are many of the products that we make that absolutely cross borders more than one time, oftentimes by the time they are through the manufacturing process. One of the things that I didn't mention is the metal snaps and buttons. A lot of these are made in Kentucky. A lot of them are made in Irapuato, Mexico, that you mentioned earlier. And many of them that are stamped in Kentucky will be shipped to Mexico for plating. And we couldn't do these things. We couldn't send these products across borders without NAFTA or USMCA. The other thing that Trevor mentioned is the manufacturers from that had left Georgia as a byproduct of NAFTA. So YKK came to the United States in manufacturing predominantly to make the original zipper that I showed you for the blue jeans industry. The blue jeans industry before NAFTA was concentrated in the Southeast United States. And after NAFTA, because of the cheaper labor, most of those operations that actually cut and sew or assemble the blue jeans left and went to Mexico. So that's kind of the negative, is that we got that, but the positive is that we figured out how to use that to our advantage and begin to take our products and intermingle them around the borders to be able to make it in such a way where we get the best out of what each country has to offer.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Alan. I'm going to start advocating for show and tell in all my Zoom calls from now on. Certainly, that was really fascinating to see all your products, and YKK is so good at that. So thanks for illustrating that. I'll definitely bring you back in. Maria Luisa, I know that you had some things you wanted to talk about with regard to just the ease of facilitating trade. We heard from David in particular, how many changes have been made to basically ensure the continuation of what was there, but also to expand the ease of trading across the border and getting those products, like Alan said, that are being shifted. I know that creates a lot of business for UPS. So tell us, what were you looking for in the agreement, and how did it kind of pan out from your perspective?
Thank you so much, Trevor. And first of all, thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be here with all of you. I want to say that for us, as UPS, as many of your audience know or not, we live and breathe trade every day. Trade is very important, and trade agreements make a big change. And I do want to give a shout out to Nasim, because the work that her agency does is so important, supporting businesses on how to export. So Nasim, thank you for the work that you do, because we work so closely with your partners and to the businesses. So for us, when we were looking at USMCA, let's say it was an interesting journey, right, to go through the process and negotiation on many areas. We really, I think, both Luis and David brought a good highlight, and the Consul Generals, about some of the changes that were needed. And I think we focused on 5 areas that were important for UPS as we were looking at this. How do we bring an agreement that was really reflecting the realities of the 20th century economy to the 21st century economy? Meaning there's more movement of cargo, there's more speed. And I love, like Alan was showing us, and I'm gonna look at zippers a whole different way, Alan, after this presentation, how the complexities, right, of the supply chain and the movement of things. And really NAFTA was reflecting more supply chains that were more, I will say, more slower and were less complex. And now we have the realities, more complexity. And USMCA, CUSMA, or TEMEC really brought front, how do we make those changes? And so I'm a trade nerd, I'm a customs nerd, that's my background. I used to work with US Customs and Border Protection, and I work at the border at the US-Mexico. I was leading an organization called the Border Trade Alliance for 10 years. I work in both borders. So there were changes that were needed, and as a trade nerd, I love Chapter 7. I know people don't hang up on me, and I promise I'm not such a nerd, but Chapter 7 on customs and trade facilitation is a big deal. Why important for businesses? Because it really modernized processes, and it put into law by the agreement best practices that we have identified globally as best practices for moving cargo in an efficient, transparent manner. And I think that helps the 3 economies. And so for us, that was important. And I know, I think Luis mentioned Chapter 25 from the small, medium-sized businesses. Very important chapter, and I will go farther. Not only important because of the chapter, so in NAFTA, if you can imagine, the small businesses were mentioned as a paragraph in an annex. That's where small businesses were mentioned. In USMCA now, they're mentioned throughout the whole agreement, not only in the chapter, but in all the chapters. The governments have to make it easier for businesses to understand. And that's important for businesses because for someone, for example, and I don't know Alan's supply chain, and I hope that we're moving his goods. I hope, Alan, that we're serving you well. But for him, if he has suppliers that are in Mexico and maybe come here and he has to put together, or either otherwise, these are small businesses that require to have the just-in-time concept is important, but it's also that predictability of the process, and that's what the Chapter 7 does. And for businesses that are, if you're considering even exporting, just do it. I know that sounds too easy, but it really has made it easier to connect. The other one briefly, and I know David talked a little bit about it, was the digital trade piece. And something that is very important for businesses to be aware, this chapter is Chapter 19. It really is a best practice chapter worldwide. We're using it at the World Trade Organization to come up with some best practices, because every good that you move, also good, those goods move with data. Where you hold the data is important, and this chapter really puts some safeguards to protect you as a business, your intellectual property rights, that information. It has very good best practices. So those are maybe 3 areas that I want to highlight. For UPS has been very important. We enable businesses to be successful, and trade agreements allow us to have a framework that makes it predictable and easy to move the goods. And so USMCA, it will take time for the full implementation to take place, but it is going to really position the region for the next 20 years or 16 years when the sunset clause comes in and we renew it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Maria Luisa. And I know you've got a stop at 10 o'clock, so if you have to drop off, please go for it, and don't worry about us. We'll be okay. But
I know you will.
Thank you guys. And listening to Maria Luisa, it's easy to get excited about trade, but we've had almost an hour of stipulations, and different tenets of the agreement that we may make some of us a little bit fearful, actually, to know about how do we comply with these many regulations. I wanted to ask Nasim about that, just what she's hearing from the U.S. Commercial Service side in terms of the appetite business kind of jump into trade at a time where there's so much uncertainty. But first, before that, I just wanted to remind everybody that we do have the chat function. If you have any questions for any of our panelists, please make sure that you use that and just send the chat to all attendees and panelists, and we will make sure we moderate that and get that to the right person. David is still around. Consul General Javier Diaz de Leon of Mexico is still around. Luis Gonzalez is still around. So we got everybody here except Maria, and I think we never got Nadia back. But Nasim, you got a great endorsement there from UPS. So tell us a little bit about what you do helping companies, and how might you encourage them not to get so bogged down into the details of these various chapters, but instead look at the broader opportunity that this creates.
Absolutely. Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Trevor. And I'm going to build off of Maria Luisa's energy. And my goal is to get you excited about trade and to show you that it is not as scary as you think. And I come from an SME background, aerospace and defense. So I know the day-to-day struggle that it takes and the unknown, which is one of the reasons I joined U.S. Commercial Services, because I found these resources that were available out there that so many companies are not utilizing. We have offices all around the country, and the office that focuses in Atlanta is George Tracy's office. He's the director in Atlanta, and I'm sure many of you know him. He's a wealth of information. In my time here, his name pops up every day. So definitely a great resource in the town that you are in. Also, I have most of my family in Atlanta, so I'm in Atlanta very often. One of the best Persian restaurants, by the way. But in regards to resources, one of the things that I think is beneficial is the FTA tariff tool. That's on trade.gov. That's very beneficial when you're looking at where you want to go, and if that's one of your concerns. As we have heard today, tariffs that were at zero have stayed at zero with the USMCA, but it is still good to go in and find out, where do you sit, where do you lie, where is your product or your service being focused on in the USMCA. In regards to Whether you're interested in going in or expanding more of a targeted market, that's very much what we're seeing now with companies due to the pandemic. It's no longer waiting for the RFQs and the RFPs to come in to see where we're going. It's let's do a very strategic I'm not even going to try to say that. Thank you. A strategic method to move forward and look at it in a way that says, I'm going to target where I'm going to go rather than looking at who's coming into me. So various ways to do that is we can do customized market research for you, for your organization to say, okay, this region of Canada or Mexico is really beneficial for me. This is how I can utilize USMCA to export my goods to other countries and still utilize all USMCA made goods. So that's really important for companies to focus on, because then the cost savings to you is much greater, and the ability to use more US resources is greater to you also. Another area that was really beneficial is to look for partners. You know, there's so many people out there that tell you they're related to a sheikh or a shah somewhere. How do we see whether they really are or they're really not? So we can really do targeted research to say, yes, this person is really who they say they are. They really do have money in the bank, and you really do want to do business with them. That's the international partner search, and it's a great resource to not have to take as many risks. That's very difficult for an SME because we don't have the time and we don't always have the resources to be able to do that. Other areas that we've seen come in the past few months since everything going on is, how do we do this in a way that is projected to us for 2021 or 2022, and we can still continue business and continue to funding before those travel are able to happen. So before, a lot of the organizations would find new clients internationally by going to trade shows, and now we're not able to do that. So now, how do we utilize virtual trade shows? How do we make it most impactful without sitting on massive amount of webinars? So really very strategic method, one-on-one counseling. And if there's any other questions, please let me know. I know we're hitting time. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And so far, I haven't seen any questions come in, so I'm going to keep us going for a few minutes. And if we do have questions, we have plenty of time for Q&A. I think we've got a stop at 10:15. So please do jump in if you have a question for anybody. I wanted to go back to Alan because, you know, we're talking about the complexities of everything, but also, you know, someone mentioned earlier on about how this region, you know, in North America now has certainty, which is kind of the envy of the world in a way, because it seems like everywhere else is kind of in flux. I mean, even some of the places like Japan and China, where we've had these kind of, you know, rudimentary kind of stopgap agreements, those may be subject to change with elections and things like that. But here in North America, we've got to this point where even if there is some challenge with implementation or some delay going forward, we still know the trajectory. We know where it's going. We know, you know, how to navigate it, even if there are complexities within it. So I wanted to talk to Alan about that. I mean, how is that certainty affected, you know, YKK's forecast? I know Japanese companies are known for creating 50 or 100-year kind of plans, but so you're probably not too perturbed by it all. But given COVID and especially, like, how does having this certainty in this region help you?
It helps tremendously, and you are correct. We do planning on our long-term planning is 50-year cycles. Our short-term planning are 4-year cycles. You know, most companies think in quarters.
Right.
You know, our quarters are 4 years, not 12 months or 4 quarters. So in that regard, it is definitely different. You know, one of the things, before I move any further, so I would be remiss, I forgot to mention that we're also in another product line, windows and doors. Commercial windows and doors, so extruded aluminum, and also residential windows and doors. And if you think about the commercial, this door here is something like you would see in a commercial building. And if you've ever been to a Chick-fil-A, you've more than likely used a YKK door. But I'll stop there. My friends at YKK AP, which is short for Architectural Products, would be disappointed in me if I did not mention their product line. It just doesn't have the same panache because it's generally a U.S. based manufactured and sold product.
Mm-hmm.
But back to your point, the certainty is absolute, and it is highly important to us because we generally manufacture where our customers are. And as manufacturing has moved around the globe, a lot of YKK's manufacturing has moved around the globe. Without NAFTA and or its following USMCA, more than likely the manufacturing that is done in Mexico and done in the United States and in Canada, a lot of that may leave and go to other places where labor is actually cheaper and or the issues are not as difficult. So just like when NAFTA came and the blue jean manufacturers left the Southeast United States and went to Mexico, we upped and moved to Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
But more to your point, if we didn't have USMCA for the region to work together as one strength, a lot of what is manufactured in the region would probably totally leave this region, which means YKK itself might leave this region,
mm-hmm.
which is not good for people like me that live and work in Marietta or Cobb County, Georgia, because I don't believe that I would follow the company to Japan or China or some
Right.
other Asian country if that's in fact what we did. And
Mm-hmm.
without these agreements, we can't continue to be competitive for our customers within the region.
Right. Got it, for sure. And we had one question from the audience from Craig Lesser. He asked, particularly, what are the most important first steps to begin the process of exporting? And I might ask Nasim about that. And before you jump into it, just wanted to note the state of Georgia has a lot of resources as well. They have offices both in Canada and Mexico, and are, if you're a Georgia-based company, which if you're in Cobb, you are, then you can avail yourself of those resources too. And I've noticed that the trade community here in Atlanta in particular is extremely collaborative. So the consulates work with the state, and the state works with the U.S. Commercial Service. Everybody kind of bands together to facilitate trade. So Nasim, for those, especially smaller companies that are maybe selling online, what are their first steps? How do you kind of even get your head around this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that's one of the things that stops us in our tracks each time we think about doing exporting. But I think one of the first areas to focus on, and with your question, I'm not sure if you already know the country that you're going into. If you already know what area you're interested in exporting to, it's a great way to connect and do the data analytics to do market research. And that is available to you by all these great resources that you have around you, like the chambers, the SBDCs. They have people that focus on the international business side of it. So that's one of the key factors to do, is first do your research before you decide to do any exporting. Secondary is regulation. So looking at the type of product you have, is it export regulated? And if it is it through EAR or ITAR? And then from there, creating a strategic method forward so that you're not hit with any fees or fines. And trust me, it's very rare to get hit with fees and fines. So that should not be of any concern as long as you have the resources around you to support you. So first step would be analytic market research. And then from there, connecting a really great partner. Either your partner can be in country, or it can be a partner in the United States that is comfortable and already sells to that country. That can either be via an export company, a freight forwarder that's already done a lot of business in that region or in that country, and also knows the culture and the background and what it takes to get product in. And again, the complexity of your product is what will create more steps or less steps of how to get into country. And again, the resources are your best tools to move forward that way.
Yeah. And one thing I've always heard is that you need to kind of assess your own readiness. Exports can't apparently can't be your savior, right? Like they've got to be an add-on, not something that's going to, get you out of the hole. I mean, because there is some complexity to it. It's not just, but there are also, opportunities that maybe you're not even seeing because your product may be perfectly suited for another market that you don't even know about just because you haven't been exposed to that.
Exactly, Trevor. I was going to add on. That's a great point because you may find that you're able to grow quicker by exporting than you would in the U.S. because there's a market that needs you more than maybe is needed here. So it's a great way to add that as a cushion for your organization of growth. And companies that do export tend to retain employees a lot longer, are able to hire quicker, and are able to expand a lot quicker. So.
Yeah, and one of the other things, a lot of companies are taking into exporting by their US-based customers. And so they do that, but then they don't really expand beyond that and think about how they might find new customers in those markets because it's a comfortable relationship. It's easy to do, but there might be green fields beyond the fence there. So Luis, I think you may have wanted to say something.
Yes, I just wanted to add that for the companies present today, they should take into consideration, most of them might know it, more than 90% of the trade between Mexico and the US, and I assume it's the same situation with Canada, is done by roads, by trucks. So put that into perspective. Once you are here in Georgia, think that your product, once you ship your product to Mexico or to Monterrey or to Mexico, the easiness to get your product there compared to other regions in the world, you don't have to you don't have to be worried about flying ships. Flying prices or by sailing prices. You just put your product with these companies in trucks and move them through the border, which is quick. It's pretty quick. And I would also add that even though the COVID-19 had closed the borders to non-essential travels between Canada and Mexico, which is pretty much tourism by the border, by land, everything when it comes to trade is open, and the cargo is moving. So I don't know if someone has a different information there, but that's something for these companies that they should take advantage of and they should take into consideration.
Yeah. Alan, I saw you nodding. Did you want to comment on that at all?
I would echo Luis's comments there. Absolutely, that the goods that are moved within Mexico, the U.S., and Canada are all by truck. They're far cheaper and far quicker than any other mode of transportation, with the exception of air. But air is painfully expensive. So in that regard, it is definitely much easier to move the goods around, because we have stuff that comes from all over the world. Some of the pigments that are used in our paints come from Japan. Some of our products come from Japan. And I'll tell you what, you're talking about probably on the short side, a 3-week process to get something from Japan by boat to the US. And generally, comparatively speaking, I mean, we run trucks regularly between our facility in Kentucky and Irapuato, Mexico, and it's probably closer to 3 days rather than 3 weeks to get stuff one way or the other. So it's absolutely more efficient or quicker to get things around the region.
Yeah, I think that's an important note, given that so many are considering, in light of COVID-19 and the disruptions that we had, considering how they can make their supply chain resilient and predictable, I guess. I had another question from the audience. I think this will probably be the last one. I'll turn it back over to the Cobb Chamber just to close this. The question was on whether there are new opportunities for the export of services. We've talked a lot about goods, and actually moving products back and forth across the border. But as we know, there are consulting services, legal services, all kinds of, even air travel is considered a service export, right? Education, there are all these kinds of services that the U.S. is actually very strong in and usually runs a surplus with its trading partners on the services side. So does anyone want to comment on opportunities there and how a service provider might approach, opening up a new market? And maybe David, I don't know if you wanted to talk
Sure.
about that
I
a
mean,
little bit.
services are fairly open for the most part. There are certain services where it's a little more difficult, but the United States has a huge surplus in services trade with Canada. A good portion of our respective economies are services based. So we could talk about software as a service, for example, and how the digital chapter adds a lot of new protections. So services pretty much open. It's also possible for professionals from the different countries to practice and offer services in the other country. It's the opportunity. There are really no restrictions or limits on the opportunity in the services area.
Yeah, I mean, I've got an interview later this week with a company based in Atlanta that's doing IT, and they're sourcing a lot of their labor from Mexico and doing a lot of their coding from there. So there's quite a bit of activity already going on, and I think it's just important to note that is there for the taking and is available. So I'll turn it back over to Dana and Amanda there at the chamber. Thank y'all so much for letting me be a part of this, and really appreciate all our panelists. We're all giving you a round of applause. If we were in person, we would swarm the stage and shake your hands and get your business cards, but we're not going to do that here. Dana and Amanda, why don't you close us out?
Thank you so much, Trevor. Trevor, thank you so much for moderating this great discussion. It's greatly appreciated. Nadia, Javier, David, Luis, Alan, Maria, and Nassim, thank you all so much for giving us some great insight and great assistance on understanding the USMCA. I want to do a quick shout out to a few people who joined us today. Donald LeBlanc with the Quebec Government Office, Mary Waters, the Deputy Commissioner of International Trade with the Georgia Department of Economic Development, Daryl Husley and Dimitris Kousidis, who's the UGA Small Business Development Center International Trade Office, Todd Ponce with the Georgia Department of Economic Development, and Craig Luster with the Pendleton Group. Thank you all so much for what you've done to join us today. We appreciate you all tuning in and asking some great questions. So again, thank you so much, everybody. We appreciate your help on this, and have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you and bye.